So thank you for taking this time on a Friday afternoon to join me for me to share a little bit with you about how to prepare slightly more effective grant applications. So I was asked to present this webinar, I guess, on two sides. First of all, I have been in your shoes. I have built a startup and I have leveraged grants in order to gain more customers and grow traction. But I'm also sit on the other side of the fence for a number of programs. I also sit as a grant assessor. So I know what it is that I look for and are required to look for when assessing grants. So today's session is really about some hints and tips that you can apply when you're looking at applying for funding, and some things to look out for when applying for funding to make sure that you're going to have the best chance of success. So I think it's really important to say here that the best thing that you can do for your company is to get customers. So never think of getting a grant as being as big a win as getting a customer, but grants are a fantastic way of being able to bring some extra cash flow into your business to be able to help your business to grow and to reach more customers. So this is what we're going to be covering today. So first, I'm going to talk a little bit more about me, not too much, but a little bit, and a little bit about my business journey. Then we're going to take a look at some of the things you should be doing when you're identifying the right types of grants to apply for in your business. We're going to look at, why these grants exist in the first place. What are the objectives of the funding party? Because remember, every transaction that you ever do in business is always, it's a win-win. So both parties have to be able to see value in what the other party is offering. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to step into the mind of a grant assessor. We're going to look at what it might look like when a grant assessor is reading your application and what things you want to put front of mind for them as they're reading through. We're going to talk about when you're structuring your grant application. And within that, you always need to set milestones and goals and budgets. So we're going to talk about how to do that realistically so that you'll have good outcomes and that you can actually meet the obligations that you are essentially setting out for yourself in the grant. We're going to talk about providing evidence of support for the project, how important this is and ways that you can go about gathering that evidence of support. And then we're going to talk about the actually reviewing your grant application and how you can go about finding the right people to give you objective feedback and make sure that you're in best place to be able to hit the submit button. So a little bit about me. So in this photo on the right-hand side, or could be your left, that's myself and my daughter, and that's at our second startup weekend that we ever ran on the Gold Coast. So I've worked in IT pretty much all my life. I actually have worked in startups since a very early stage, but we didn't call them startups when I first started working at Virtual Tours. We just called ourselves a tech business. And so it's been 20 years since I joined my first startup. I've also run my own companies and I've also worked in corporates. When I moved to the Gold Coast about 10 years ago, I'd been working in corporates for about 10 years and I got quite used to it being rather comfortable. And when I arrived on the Gold Coast, I was really surprised to see that there really wasn't the same tech scene here as there was in Melbourne, which is where I'd come from. So they say if you can't find your crowd, then create it. And so I started running different technology events, so hackathons, startup weekends, things like that, to try and stimulate the tech ecosystem on the Gold Coast and to start trying to find the other people that were building cool, innovative businesses here. And there were actually a lot. There were a lot of people that were building great businesses, but they were doing it in silos, in their own garages and homes, and they weren't connected and they weren't talking to each other. One of those companies that I was able to connect up with was a startup called Opmantech, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about Opmantech's journey in the next slide. But essentially, I joined Opmantech as employee number 12. We're at a very early stage of growth, and I worked with Opmantech to scale from the Gold Coast into various other countries all over the world. Opmantech's now in, I think, 130 countries across the world and has hundreds of thousands of users. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to talk about how I leveraged grants in order to help that company to grow, and also leveraged those grants, of course, to launch the Gold Coast Innovation Hub, which we launched officially in 2017. So this is the grant journey for Opmantech. So Opmantech make network management and IT audit software. So software for IT people to be able to monitor what's going on in their IT environment. So you can tell if a server's down, if the network is slow, you can see in one screen what's going on, where the problem is happening and why. So this is software that can be deployed over the internet, and so it's incredibly scalable. So Opmantech's grant journey started with, and a lot of you will be in the same place if you're developing something new and innovative, it starts with an R&D tax incentive. So you're building something, you're not sure if it's going to work, you're doing a lot of R&D, so there's an opportunity there for non-competitive tax incentives to be able to receive money back on the money you're spending building something new and innovative. Opmantech then secured its first couple of customers, and those customers were actually international. So then we started using another non-competitive grant, which is the EMDG, so the Export Marketing Development Grant, which allows you to claim back some of the costs of deploying sales and marketing resources in international markets if you're exporting. Next on our grants journey, we worked with Gold Coast City Council. So anyone that's based on the Gold Coast, you may not be aware of this, but the Gold Coast City Council actually has export assistance grants. So these grants provide $1,500 if it's in a Southeast Asia area, or $3,000 if you're exporting into Europe or the US or more distant countries, to help you with your export development. And so if you're attending potential customer meetings, you can supply them with a document that sort of shares your diary, your travel diary, and if they believe that it's going to help your company to develop a better export pathway, then they will fund that. And that is available, I think it runs for, I think you can claim it for up to 3 years after you first start exporting. Our next grant was the Ignite Ideas grant. It was the year that they actually opened up. And so we applied for that to build out some dashboards and to adjust the way that our software was being received internationally, and to create more of a software as a service type offering, because we were previously selling our software using more of a standard licensing model. So it allowed us to shift to software as a service. We had a growth grant from the Office of Small Business, another Queensland grant. We also were then able to tap into the Entrepreneurs Program, which is a federal or Australian government grant for companies that are at a slightly later stage. I think you have to have revenues of over 1.5 million or losses of over 1.5 million to be able to tap into that. They send someone out to your business that comes out and does an independent review, provides some recommendations, and then they provide matched funding to implement some of those recommendations. We were part of the Austrade landing pad, so another program, not necessarily a grant, but you're still having to apply in a similar way as applying for a grant. So when we decided to set up a San Francisco office, we used the Austrade landing pad to do that. And then most recently, Opmantec applied for a Go Global grant. So these are run by Trade and Investment Queensland. These are grants that allow you to, or that support a new opportunities or new customer engagements in new markets and new industries. So Opmantec were able to engage with NASA, and we were able to work with TIQ to get a sale across the line to be able to implement Opmantec software with NASA, which was a great opportunity for Opmantec. So as you can see, all the way through the Opmantec journey, customers have always been number one, but there are loads and loads of different types of grant assistance and support from every level of government that you can tap into as your business grows. So you just need to be aware of the grants and opportunities that are available. And you also have to be very much aware of where you are at in your business and knowing, so you know which ones to apply for at which time so that you have the best chance of success. So I promised 6 steps to help you with success. And so we're going to run through those now. I did sort of mention them at the start, but absolutely the first step to be successful in grant writing and achieving grant funding is to make sure that you find a grant that is right for your business. So to illustrate this, I thought I'd just paint a picture here of a couple of different types of businesses. Now, with nearly all grant funding, they always are funding a project. There's always a start and an end to the funding that you receive, and there are always milestones in the middle. So you have to have a project outlined that you're applying for funding for. No one just decides to give you free money. That they are giving you money for a purpose, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. So here I just kind of created a couple of, I guess, what you'd call personas, business owner personas. So at the top here, we've got sole trader Sam. So Sam has got a great business. He's been established for 8 years. He's based in Brisbane. He's got a really good, loyal customer base, but he's busy all the time. He's got a part-time admin assistant. He knows that he'd be able to grow the business a little if he was a little bit more streamlined in his paperwork. So the project that he wants to implement is around workflow automation. So creating marketing automation and creating automation within his team and the way that he communicates with his admin assistant and with external parties so that he can free up some more of his time to be able to take on more clients and grow his business. At the bottom, we've got Go Global Greta. So she established her company 2 years ago. She's based in a regional city in Mackay. Her business is based around some new online technology that she has created herself. She's had it in the market for a while, and her user base is growing steadily month on month. She currently she's had a little bit of investment, and she currently employs 2 developers and a marketing person. Now, her project is to launch a new paid upgrade of her current program. So her current technology has very little revenue running through it, but they have designed an upgrade which will tap into a slightly different market and will mean that her company will be able to then derive higher levels of revenue from their customer base, and hopefully also tap into a new customer base. So I was specifically asked to talk about the Ignite Ideas grant. And so, but I am going to compare this here to another grant. So you can kind of see what I mean about finding the grants that are right for your business. So the Ignite Ideas grants and every grant that you apply for will always have a really, really clear outline and a really clear set of goals that they are trying to achieve, which you'll be able to find as you click through all of the attachments that come with the grant. So Ignite Ideas makes it very clear that its purpose is to support Queensland-based small to medium businesses that have high growth potential to undertake commercialisation projects that will strengthen key industries in Queensland, diversify the Queensland economy, compete in domestic and global markets, engage and/or benefit regional Queensland, and create jobs for now and into the future. So when we look at that description, even though what Sam was doing in his business is quite innovative, putting in a new marketing automation system or workflow automation system is innovative, it doesn't support or strengthen any of the key industries in Queensland. It doesn't really help to diversify the Queensland economy. He's servicing an existing market around bookkeeping. It doesn't really compete in domestic and global markets. He's still going to be servicing his local market. He'll just be able to service more of his local customers. It doesn't really engage with or benefit regional Queensland. He's based in Brisbane. And it might create a couple of new jobs within his business, but they're likely to be administrative or clerical. So they're not really going to be creating the jobs of the future that this grant is particularly looking for. So a number of you would, if you are Queenslanders that are tuning in, would have seen the Business Boost grant that closed at the start of the year that was offered by the Department of Small Business Education and Training. So that grant has this description. The Business Basics Grant Program provides support to businesses to increase core skills and adopt best practice. This support includes funding activities in 5 priorities: training and coaching, website building or upgrades, professional business advice, strategic marketing services, business continuity and succession. So if we look at the Business Boost grant, now Sam is a much better fit for this grant because what he's doing is he is adopting best practices by adopting automation into his business. He's increasing the core skills. And in doing that, he'll be able to support his business continuity, and it really kind of falls into that strategic marketing services as well. So Sam's business project, even though it is great and innovative, is much more suited to something like the Business Boost grant than the Ignite Ideas grant, because the Ignite Ideas grant clearly states that it is looking to support businesses that are growing, that are creating new jobs, that are affecting regional Queensland, that are hopefully going to create competition in domestic and global markets, and that are going to diversify the economy. So I'm going to assume that most of you on the call now are people that think that you are well suited to the Ignite Ideas grant. You're building something that's pretty unusual or pretty new and innovative, and it's going to be a good initial fit to the actual objectives of the grant. So now we have to start looking at things like, is your company eligible? So for the Ignite Ideas grant, you have to be headquartered in Queensland. You need to be small but growing, with no more than 50 full-time employees, and then there's a whole full-time equivalent employees, and then there's a whole bunch of extra things there to stop large organizations from setting up smaller entities that then apply for these grants. So you have to actually be a small business that is growing. If you've had grant funding from another government entity for the same project or product, you can't apply. And you also need to be registered for GST at the full application submission time. So the Ignite Ideas grant is broken up into two phases. You submit an expression of interest, and then you submit a full application. So at the time of the expression of interest, you don't have to be registered for GST. But at the point when you go and apply for the full application, if you've been successful in the first bit, you must be registered for GST. There's also 2 tiers to the funding. So for earlier stage ideas, you can apply for tier 1. You can't have applied or received, you can have applied, but you can't have received Ignite Ideas grant funding previously for the same product or project. And you must be able to make a cash contribution to the project that's equal to at least 20%. If you're applying for tier 2, you must have successfully completed a tier 1 Ignite Ideas project, and you must be able to make a cash contribution to the project that's at least equal to 50%. I should say at the moment as well that if you have got any questions as I'm going through, I'll pause at the end of each of the points so that I can answer a few of them. So feel free to drop them in the chat at any time. The next and a really, really important point is your product eligible? So the grant, the Ignite Ideas grant is specifically tailored to support highly innovative new products. And if you look at the frequently asked questions, they clearly state that funding is only available to commercialize highly innovative new products or services that have already reached minimum viable product stage or beyond. You also need to have a product that's already tested in the market. So the essential core of your new product or service should already have been tested in action with potential customers as a proof of concept, prototype, and/or pilot. And clinical trials are not eligible. I'm just going to quickly go to the comments. So are these conditions just for the Ignite? So the conditions that I'm going through at the moment are for the Ignite Ideas grants. However, as we go through the points, they are suitable for every type of grant that you go for. You're always going to need to be looking for the same sorts of points within the frequently asked questions and within the grant guidelines. And mostly this first section is really tailored towards, is this grant right for you? The next 5 points are more generic. Ignite Ideas grant is currently open, Greg, for round 8. So you should be able to find, it's open for expressions of interest. They're open until the 22nd, I think, of July. I will keep going with the presentation. So we're going to keep talking about MVPs for the minute. So what is a minimum viable product? So this is pulled out of the frequently asked questions. This is where they see an MVP as being. So essentially, when you first come up with a great idea for a business, you would go for a proof of concept. So a proof of concept may be where you have, from a startup's perspective, you could potentially have put up a landing page and have started to get some early interest, and perhaps you're manually servicing the market when you are actually intending to build out an application. The next phase of that would be a prototype where you actually build out some technology around what it is that you're trying to deliver. Then you would have a pilot where you have maybe 1 or 2, just a very small group of potential customers that work directly with your piece of technology, your solution or service, to be able to be able to test it and get feedback. And then once you have that feedback and you have a product that is ready to go to market, that is when they see you as being at a minimal viable product stage. Now, these grants are specifically for products and services that are at minimum viable product stage. So you have to be able to show that you are at a point where if you receive this funding, you'll be ready to start commercializing. Now, obviously, you also need to be able to match the funding. Funding based upon the guidelines needs to be matched with cash. It can be brought from internal revenues, so existing revenues that you have within your business. You can bring in the funding from investors or yourself as a founder or a founding investor to be able to match the funding. You may be able to bring in the funding from a customer. So if you can show that you have a customer that is willing to trial and use your product and they're happy to make a 20% contribution towards the project, then that is absolutely acceptable. Also, project partners. So if you're working with a project partner on your project and they are willing to provide a letter of support and they are willing to contribute the 20% or 50% if you're doing the tier 2 to the project, to be able to to be able to leverage the grant, then that is also perfectly acceptable way of being able to match the funding. So the grant also lays out some key activities that you can apply, that you should be using this grant funding for. So as we previously spoke about with your product needing to be at MVP stage, what they're really looking at doing is providing you with funding that will allow you to sell and market your product. Now you can be doing that through online channels, exhibiting at trade shows, trade delegations, or online conferences and online trade shows as we've got at the moment, through customer and investor engagement. So you can use the funding to be able to work with investors to put some collateral together towards raising capital, or to fund some of the activities involved in trials or pilots with customers, to do product and service demonstrations which are required by new customers or markets, to investigate production and assembly options. So perhaps you've been able to create something and you are looking to be able to produce it locally, or you're looking to be able to produce it elsewhere in higher volumes. That is also acceptable activities under their commercialization guidelines, and securing intellectual property protection is also accepted. Now, you can, in some circumstances, do some product development as part of this grant funding. So they will consider people that are doing some changes to products that are as a result of customer engagement, and they will fund a little bit of testing in new markets. But as previously mentioned, clinical trials is absolutely, they say no to. The amount of time that it takes is too long. So the idea of the Ignite Ideas grant is to be able to provide some fuel into a company that has a potential for high growth so that it can grow. So they're really looking at the activities that you're doing in this. If you are doing some product refinement, it's based on the fact that you have delivered a product to a customer or to a customer segment, that you are taking that feedback, you're going to very quickly iterate, implement those changes so that you can grow faster and bigger. So that's the end of step one around making sure that you are actually eligible for the grant. So I'm just going to quickly go back to messages here. If you develop an assessment through a PhD project and tested and genuine cooperation, is that enough? It would really, Alberto, you need to be quite far down the commercialization process, and it's hard to tell from that question whether what sort of product it is that you're bringing to market. But just be aware that the idea behind these grants is to have a fast to be able to very quickly implement and gain new customers. So if you are not at a point in your business cycle where that's going to happen, you probably might not be quite right for the grant. Can you still use digital currency for the 20%? I don't believe that you can. They are specifically asking for it to be a cash contribution. Ananta said, is this grant available every year? So the grant has been, it is subject to what the government chooses to do. Previously, we've had, on a couple of occasions, there's been more than one intake per year. At the moment, we know that round 8 is open at the moment. So I don't know what will happen after this round. We really actually have to play it year by year. And are the two tier levels available with all grants? No, every grant's different. So in this particular instance, it's sort of allowing for 2 different levels of commercialization. So the first level is really when you're at very early stage getting your first customers. The second tier, you will already have customers and you're looking to expand significantly from there. And they're expecting that your business will have grown to a point where you'll be able to support 50% of the project cost yourself. So they are expecting your company to have better cash flow and to be better able to match funding when you get to tier 2. But there's not actually a lot of grants that have that 2-tier process. So most of them have a single tier for funding. Quite a lot of grants do have an EIR, an expression of interest process though. So very popular grants will nearly always have an expression of interest followed by a full grant application. So in previous years, we've had around 600 applications for Ignite Ideas in each intake. I think they're expecting about 800 this time. So it's a lot of applications, and they try and usually when they sort of cut it down, there's around about maybe 100, 150 of the applications that will be invited to participate in the second phase of so to complete a full grant application. But once you get through to a full grant application, then you've got quite good odds of being able to receive the funding from there. So we're moving, so that was very, very tailored to the Ignite Ideas grant. We're going to move now to some more, I guess, generic points that any grant that you're applying for, you really should take into consideration. So step 2 is to understand why the grant that you're applying for exists. So yeah, everything that we do in business, it's all about achieving outcomes, and we're looking for a win-win. So we're looking for, the government or the organisation that is releasing grants will be releasing that to try and hit some specific objectives that their cabinet are responsible for. And obviously you in receiving those grants are looking to meet some specific objectives within your business as well, which is generally for your business to grow, be more streamlined, and to be able to enter new markets and make more money. So with whatever grant that you go for, it's always really, really worthwhile to spend a little bit of time looking at the organisation or department that's behind the grants and to try and work out like why are they offering this grant? What is it that they are trying to achieve? So if we do look at the Ignite Ideas grant, it's being offered by the Department of Innovation through their Advance Queensland. And so if you drill down, you go to the Department of Innovation, Sport and Tourism, Sport and Innovation, and you jump onto the innovation page, it tells you very clearly what their objectives are in this department. So they are transforming Queensland by investing in the innovation sector to grow the future. Now I've highlighted some key lines here, which hopefully you can, that they're standing out on the slide, but they say, that's why we're backing the big thinkers who stand ready to help us. We're building on our strengths and helping our regions to compete globally. We're supporting startups to commercialize their ideas and investing in science and technology. Join us as we build an innovation economy and deliver economic growth and jobs across our state. So what I like to do when I'm applying for a grant is I do my research on who is offering it, and I actually write down the key phrases that I see them talk about in all of their publications and things like that. So in this case, I would be writing down, they want to help regions compete globally. They want to commercialize ideas, and they want to deliver economic growth and jobs. And what I would then try and do is make sure I tie that messaging into my grant application and make sure that I'm really talking their language when I'm writing my grant. Here's some more little snippets that I pulled off of media releases, again, from the Department of Innovation around the Ignite Ideas grant. So again, we can listen to their messaging, the way that they talk about what they are trying to do. So the Palaszczuk government is encouraging Queensland entrepreneurs to help fire up COVID-19 economic recovery plan with the opening of round 8. Right? So he says, the Advance Queensland Ignite Ideas program is designed to help startups and small businesses scale up great innovations for commercial success. Since 2016, Ignite Ideas has supported more than 5,600 Queensland jobs. And again, a slightly older snippet from another media release. This one was from Kate Jones in their, I think, third year. Again, they talk about the companies that they've supported, about employing more staff, supporting the economy, and the number of jobs that they've created, and also regional Queensland, right? So we know that this is what they're trying to achieve. So it's really important when we're completing our grant application, that we make sure that we're talking their language and talking to the things that matter to them. Okay, so that was quite a quick step. I haven't got any more questions on that point, so I'll move to step 3, which is, what does a grant assessor need to see? So you should be thinking about this as well. So one of the things that I like to try and picture in my mind as I'm reading through my grant application that I've written is, I try and imagine that my grant application is one of those 800 that has landed in a pile. And I try and picture what it would be like for a grant assessor to be sitting there looking at 800 different applications, and how can I make it easy for them to choose mine? So the most important things that you need to do is make sure that you have really clear descriptions and avoid jargon. So there's a lot of really good books out there that you can read, and a lot of them talk about being able to explain it to your grandmother. And it's really important. So it does depend on the grant that you're applying for. Now with Ignite Ideas, they actually engage independent panels from industry. So you will have people that have a better chance of understanding what it is that your technology does than probably with a lot of other grants. However, it's still, if you go into very big specifics around the types of technologies that you're using, it's going to go over people's head. So you really need to be able to just very simply and succinctly explain, this is the problem that we're addressing. This is the solution. This is what makes it so special and unique. This is the market that we're targeting, and this is why it's a great idea and is going to grow. And if we have this funding, why we're going to be able to employ more people and make lots of jobs. The second point, and this is really important when you get through to a full grant application. So with the Ignite Ideas EOI, it does not have weighting on the answers, but when you get through to a full application, there is always weighting. So when you look at the grant application, there will be, you get asked a whole lot of questions. You're asked about the description and your project plan and your milestones and all that sort of stuff. But then you get to the merit criteria, and the merit criteria will have certain questions that are worth 50%, some that are worth 30%. It's really important that you pay attention and that you make sure that you fill out the merit criteria the best. I have seen so many grant applications that come in where people have put an enormous amount of effort into describing their business and their project and their background, and then they get through to the section about merit criteria and they don't actually address any of the points, and they don't actually respond properly to those questions. And it is those merit criteria that actually determine the success of your project. So it's really important that you take a look at the merit criteria, pay particular attention to the ones that are the heaviest weighted, and give 80% of your energy and effort when you're completing responses to those specific parts of the grant. The next one is to provide all required attachments. Make an effort to provide relevant attachments. Quite often there'll be grant applications that will ask you to upload a pitch. And so often people just, they're applying for, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they don't upload a pitch. They upload, an explainer video that they had from their website or something like that. Make sure that if you've been asked to upload a pitch that runs for 3 to 5 minutes, that you actually upload a pitch that runs for 3 to 5 minutes. It's it's important, and particularly with those ones as well, it gives the assessor a better chance to be able to understand who you are as a founder, what drives you, and understand quite often in those words that you're expressing verbally and in your body language, you can actually learn and understand a lot more about a business than you can from the description that's written in the grant application. So make sure that you include all of those things. So you're making the job of the grant assessor as easy as possible to be able to pick you. Another point that I wanted to make, or a tip that I wanted to make. So quite often when you're reading through a grant application, you'll have questions like this, where they ask you to explain why you believe a product or service is at and beyond MVP stage. But then they quite clearly explain what it is that they want you to explain. So in this instance, they've said, address product development, customer testing and pilots, and the steps undertaken to reflect customer feedback and prototype status. So you need to address all of those elements. So don't just read that first line, explain why you believe the product or service is at beyond MVP stage, and just write, I believe we're at beyond MVP stage because my sister's brother's cousin has been using it for 2 years and he thinks it's great. You need to actually address each of these points, and the easiest way to make sure that you're addressing each of these points is to create them as subheadings, or you can, or have product development little dash, and then directly address each of those points that you've been asked about in the question, to make sure that you're really covering off on all the things that they want to know around your product and where you're actually at with it. Now, these are the two most important documents. As I said, every grant has them. Every grant will always have a guidelines document. A lot of grants will have a frequently asked questions document. They're there to help you. I suggest that you print them out and have them next to you. And as you're going through each question and filling out your grant application, that you glance back across and just make sure that you are meeting the guidelines. And of course, if you will have questions that pop into your head, and more often than not, these frequently asked questions have been designed over this is the 8th round of the Ignite Ideas grant. So there's been 7 previous rounds of people asking questions, which will have formed this. So just about everything that you need to know will be in these documents somewhere. Okay. Now we're on to step 4, setting achievable milestones and budgets. So within your grant application, you will be asked to define your own milestones, and you'll also be obviously asked to provide a budget. It's really important that you set achievable milestones, or you'll get held up at the first point in your project. So don't put a milestone as being that you're going to close $1 billion in sales by the time you get to month 3. They recommend that you do between, I think it's 8 and 10 points, and they should directly relate to the activities that you're going to deliver in your within your project. So, for example, if you were going to be doing if you're going to be rolling out a go-to-market strategy, and you are going to be signing on a variety of pilot customers, then you might have milestones in there, which is an advertising campaign is released, the first customers are signed on, that at least 3 people complete a particular process that you've built in. So you have small manageable things that relate directly to the project plan that you're putting out there, and that you can quite easily prove have been achieved when you go to do your milestone submission. So these milestones, you will have to submit a report on each one. So you will get the system will send you out a reminder when the due date for your milestone is coming up, and you will have to respond to it, and you'll have to say where you're at, have you met your milestones, and be able to provide evidence that you have actually met them. And so keep that in mind as well. If it's the first time you've ever had grant funding, you might not be aware, but you should be doing things like taking photographs when you are working with customers, taking screenshots of work that's being delivered, taking note of the dates and of media releases, and keep copies of media releases. Anything that you're doing, keep them as evidence so that you can submit them at milestone time, so that you can get that milestone approved and you can get your next payment through as soon as possible, because you will have tranches of payment that are tied to meeting each of the milestones. Okay, another really important thing when you're mapping out your project plan and your budget is to make sure that you have a realistic start date for the project based on the grant. So you would need to have a start date for your project between 4 and 6 months from the date of the submission. If you have a look at the timeline that's available on the Ignite Ideas grant at the moment, it states that people should hear back about their expressions of interest within within 6 to 8 weeks of submitting, right? So if you're not even going to hear back to see if you're through to round 2 for 4 to 6 weeks or 6 to 8 weeks, whatever it is, then you can expect that you'll have that again to be able to find out if you've actually been successful with your grant funding. So make sure that you don't plan too many major activities that are going to occur prior to the starting of this project grant funding. You also need to be aware of the end date. So if you are applying for Tier 1, you have to scope out a project that will be able to be completed within 12 months of receiving your first payment. And if you're doing Tier 2, within 24 months of receiving your first payment. So be realistic when you're setting your timelines, allow buffers for things to get completed on time. If you've got things that need to be shipped in, if you've got services that are being delivered, always make sure that you factor in a little bit of contingency and make sure that you're still going to be able to complete your project within that designated period of time. Now, when you're building out your budget, a few things to be aware of. Again, I keep saying be realistic, but it is important. You certainly don't want to receive the funding for this project and then realize that you actually were completely under budget and can't deliver what you said you were going to. So make sure that you do reach out for quotes and check in costs for the different components that you are looking to implement as part of the project. Try to, especially in the very early stages, like when you're doing an EOI, try to avoid being too specific around the specific people or resources that you're going to deploy to deliver different elements of your project. You have got, there's a fair bit of wait time before the project will actually start. There may be new solutions, new products and services that come available. You may form different partnerships and be working with different people at the time that your grant is approved. And so you want to make sure that when you are sorry about that. Sorry about that. I don't know where my screen went for a moment there. Yes, okay. Make sure that the expenditure that you lay out in your grant application is eligible. So there is a clear list. We went through the different commercialization activities that you can include in your budget, but there's also a list of ineligible expenditure. So things like business as usual activities. So if you can't fund your regular activities around administration and payroll and the things that you have to do as general business as usual. Everything that you that you fund through your grant funding has to be specifically related to the project that you put forward. So you need to be aware of that. A lot of people seem to think that because there are two tiers, one of them's up to 100,000, the other's up to 200,000, that you have to go for 100,000. You don't have to go for 100,000. You should be putting forward a budget that is appropriate for the project that you want to deliver. You're not going to be, you won't be marked down for not spending enough money, but if it looks like you've got a frivolous use of funds or overspending in particular areas, it doesn't look as good on the grant application. So just make sure that, yeah, if your project is 60,000, you put in a $60,000 budget. Okay, I've got a couple of questions here, I think. So from Daryl, do you have to own the technology, or can you use a software as a service platform that is the foundation of the business? Look, Daryl, ideally you would be delivering your own technology because you want to, like, you would ideally be the software as a service platform that's being scaled out. I haven't seen many applications get through where people are trying to resell another product. Yeah, I don't think that would be I think you'd be better suited to some of the small business grants or other grants if that is your business model. It's really is much more suited to people that own the IP and that are scaling their own creation, their own innovative creation internationally. All right, so step 5. Show support for your project. This is actually super important when you are, so not in the expression of interest phase so much. In the expression of interest phase, you're really just trying to meet all the merit criteria and show that you're suitable for a full-scale grant. But when you actually get into the full grant application process, then showing support for your project is absolutely vital, and it's really, really important for grant assessors to be able to see that you have that you're able to quantify and prove that you are able to embark on this commercialization journey that you're putting forward. So how do you show that you have support for your project? The best people to be able to show support for your project are your customer or potential customers. So if you are working business to business, for example, you have a particular customer that has said, yes, when you develop these features, I'm absolutely happy to trial. You need to try and get that in writing. Now that can be in the form of either a letter of support, a MOU or a memorandum of understanding, which is basically an agreement that an agreement to work together. Or ideally a purchase order. If you have a purchase order that shows that once some particular activities have been delivered that they're going to buy, then that's incredibly good proof that you have support for your project. Beyond customers, so I would say customers are A1. That's your best option for being able to show support, particularly when we know that that like for the Ignite Ideas grant, that it's all about commercialization, right? And commercialization is about getting customers. Now, if you can't get letters of support from your customers, partners are another really good way of showing support. So if you're working with other organizations to deliver your product, or if you're engaging at a trade show and you're applying for some support to support that activity, then having representatives from industry who are happy to write a letter of support and say, we would love to have this product XYZ exhibit at our trade show. We're prepared to we're prepared to give an extra promotional package or something if they are able to come along. So you try and you try and get letters of support or some sort of incentive agreement there that you can submit as well to show that you've got support from partners. Finally, supporting organizations are also great. So if you are linked into an innovation hub, or if you are part of a group that provides support to businesses, and you're able to get a letter of support from them to say, we are going to help make sure that that this person is able to, or this company is able to deliver their project successfully, that we'll make introductions for them, that we will ensure that they're well looked after, and help to make sure that they meet their obligations and milestones and things like that. That's another really good way of being able to show that your company is competent and is supported by the right groups of people to make sure that they're not going to fall over when they're delivering this grant activity, that they will actually be able to successfully complete the project. So when you're getting letters of support, the easiest way to get letters of support is basically to write the letter yourself. Now, at a minimum, have a template for each partner to complete. This on the left-hand side is an example of the letter of support that we had put together when I was initially gathering interest and support to start the Innovation Hub. So as you can see, the bits that we wanted the partner or the supporter to complete are highlighted in yellow, and it basically has a written report, a written letter with some bits and pieces that they can fill in. Now that makes it 10 times easier for a busy organization or CEO, because most of these letters of support, they want them signed off by the board or CEO. So these are busy people, so that's the best way to get something in front of them and signed off in a reasonably short time frame, is to basically give them something that they can very quickly turn around. Now, I personally actually usually go a step further than this. I actually usually put myself in the organization's shoes and start filling out the things that I'd really like them to help us with and to contribute to the project. I then highlight what I've put in there, and I send it over, and I just say, look, I'd love a letter of support here. I've outlined the ways that I think we could work together on this project. Please feel free to change anything that you like, and if you can send it back by Friday, that would be great. And 9 times out of 10, they're happy with what you've written and they sign it off. And the beauty of doing that is you actually then end up with letters of support that are, that really support your idea and your dream of how you're going to work with these people on the project. So definitely have the templated letters. If you just reach out to people and ask for a letter of support without the template, it's like pulling teeth. It's really hard to get a letter back out. So yes. Now then, and so the final step for today is about using another set of eyes before you submit your project. So it doesn't matter how great you think your submission is, there'll always be errors and there will always be things that you can't see. We also always tend to have a tendency to speak our own jargon. And so things that make sense to us and the people directly around us it doesn't always make sense to an external party. So it's really important to try and get other people to read through the application before you submit it, to make sure that it does make sense, that you've covered everything off and that you haven't missed anything. So if you have got mentors that you're working with, most mentors will be very, very happy to review your grant application. The best way to actually go through a grant application is to actually Zoom with the mentor and do live edits. The reason for that is that you can then talk through why different things should be changed or what issues they have with the way that particular things have been structured. It's a little bit like when you submit your assignment for feedback at school, and if all you get is a whole lot of red lines and scribble and things to change, you might go through and make those changes, but you might not necessarily understand the thoughts behind them. Whereas if you are on an interactive call with your mentor, reading through each of the points of the grant application, then you're much more likely to be able to put your head or get your head into where the reviewer is. And it's highly likely that the questions that they are asking you will be the questions that your grant assessor will be asking themselves as they are reading through the documentation. I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier on, but I really wanted to point it out now, because this is the point when you're doing your reviews of your grant application where people will turn around and go, what is it that you do? Or what does that mean? Now, if people don't understand what it is that you do, you have to fix it. So you can't sit there and think, you know, they just don't understand technology. It's fine. I'm going to submit it. You want to make sure that everyone can understand what it is that you're doing. So you need to be able to change your messaging. So if you've put this in, if you've got a couple of people to review your grant application, they don't understand the business model, the technology you're using, or most importantly, like what problems it solves and for who, then go back in and try again to repurpose your messaging to make sure that you're really clearly communicating to anyone that reads it why your product is awesome, why it's going to grow, and why you should be receiving funding to help it to grow. Okay, so I'm down to, these are my last few little hints and tips. So they were my 6 key success tips to making sure that you have great grant applications. But these are a few extra little ones that kind of didn't fit in there, but they're still important. So obviously don't wait until the last minute to write or submit your grant application. It always seems like there's plenty of time until there isn't. I know a couple of people that had spent actually weeks writing a grant application. It was a fantastic grant application. They waited until an hour beforehand because they were madly cramming to put together some business plans and other supporting documents for it. So they waited till an hour beforehand. Then they realized that the grant had to be in on New South Wales time, not Queensland time. They had 5 minutes to get their grant application in, and they weren't able to get all of the supporting evidence uploaded in time, and they missed the cutoff. It's a huge amount of wasted time if you leave it to the last minute. So try at the very least to get your grant application in, 24 hours beforehand, 12 hours beforehand, but absolutely do not leave it to the last minute. You don't want to have wasted all that time that you could have been spending, writing proposals for potential customers instead. The next one is, and it really surprises me how many people don't realize that you can reach out to the department or the organization that is offering the grants if you're not sure. So on every grant overview, when you get on the page, there's always a contact us section, and you can absolutely reach out. So if you're applying and you're not sure if your business is structured correctly, or you're not sure if your your employee base would be classified as less than 50, or you're not sure if you have got the right amount of supporting evidence, or you're not sure if your business plan is too long because it's 20 pages and it says that it's 2 in the grant application, right? You can call those numbers and you can check in with them, and you can find out if you are eligible. And you'll actually find out a lot more when you make those phone calls. So don't ever be afraid to pick up the phone and ask the department about the grants, whether you're a good fit for them, whether you have everything that you need to be able to apply for them. Pay attention to word count. So nearly every grant these days have online application forms which have word counts on them. A lot of grants will have downloadable Word templates that you can fill out. And the word templates obviously tell you how many words you can fill out, but you sit there and you type it out like crazy, and you don't really pay attention. Then you have written this perfectly formed description or response to one of the merit criteria. You go to cut and paste it into the application, and then you realize that you're 300 words over and you have to go back and cut out all those words. So make sure when you're in Microsoft Word and you're filling out your responses, and that you are being mindful of the word count at all times, and just try and cut out those filler words and filler sentences that don't directly impact the reader, or directly inform of what it is that your product does, or how you meet the criteria that have been laid out in the application. You don't have to do it yourself as well. There are lots of great grant writers around. So if you don't feel confident or don't have the time, there's lots of grant writers around that can help to complete grant applications for you. So again, it's just, if it's not your forte, if you're better off being out there and servicing customers, then, you know, make a commitment to sign up some more customers, and then use the revenue from that to pay someone else to fill out the grant for you. So that brings me to the end of the presentation that I put together. I did have a couple of other points that I didn't touch on the presentation that I think might be relevant to this particular audience. So some of that is around regional. So if you are in a regional city, then you should definitely be mentioning that within the grant application. And if your commercialization activities are going to be creating job opportunities in a regional city, and they are knowledge-based jobs. So if you're going to be hiring, you know, product developers, marketers, accountants, things like that, then, you know, do make sure that you mention that you will be creating jobs in a regional city. And from the perspective of the Queensland government, not the Australian government, but from the Queensland government, the Gold Coast is considered to be a regional city. Any of the cities that are outside the Brisbane borders are considered to be regional, but they also do have classifications for other cities that are much more remote, much further away. I can't remember what they call their description of it, but you can refer to the Gold Coast as being a regional city. We are, you know, hour and a half outside of Brisbane and away from a lot of the key resources that are in Brisbane. So you can mention that. Now, I'm going to just quickly go to the chat box and see if there's anyone who has any other questions that they'd like to ask. Because I have run well ahead of time. So okay. Ooh. Thanks, Scott. Much appreciated. So yeah, I hope you all did learn a little bit from that presentation. I have got a question here from Ross. If you were successful in Tier 1, can you apply for Tier 2 for leveraging what you did during Tier 1, e.g. commercializing a new customer based on the data? It does cover that off in the frequently asked questions. So essentially what they would be looking for, if your company has applied for Tier 1 previously and is now applying for Tier 2, it would need to be probably a different, quite a different feature and project that you would be building out, and a new commercialization thing. So if you're just targeting another market, for example, if you've built out your product and you've now had significant traction in Victoria and you would like to now target Perth, probably not going to be right. But if you had built out a commercial module for, like, let's say you're Atlassian and you've created your project management module and you've got a project where you would like to now build another module that would leverage off of that client base but does something different, then that new module is probably very suitable for tier 2 funding, because you're going to be able to leverage your existing commercial client base to be able to sell to, and you're going to be able to expand your product offering. So it's a very different product that they're funding, but it's for the same business, if that makes sense. Quantum flow with a video. I believe that the video does get sent out to everyone that registered afterwards. So, so I will double check, but I'm quite sure that that happens. John, thank you, John. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be able to talk to you all, and thank you, actually, everyone, for joining this call. This is the first webinar that I've delivered for Business Station, so I'm looking forward to doing many more. Deb, there are many I haven't applied for because of the condition. Yeah. Yeah, so the full-time equivalents, Deb, contractors do fall under a full-time equivalent classification. So you can refer to that. You just make sure that you spell that out in the application, that you currently employ X number of people as contractors. Chris has asked, at the start of the talk, I mentioned a lot of different grants that I applied for. How do you find out about the grants and other grants? Good question. So there's a couple of places. I mean, so at the Innovation Hub, we do our best to try and alert people whenever there are grants available. But both the Queensland government and the federal government both have grant finders, which you can use to search for grants that are currently open, and you can sort through those. There's also quite a number of little platforms and things that have popped up over the years. Like there's one that's called the Grants Hub, which you can subscribe to, that basically search and find all of the different grants that are available and publish them in one place. So what I might do is see if the Business Station team can actually provide a link to the federal government's grant finder page when we send out the presentation at the end of the talk. Ross has asked, is it beneficial to have investors coming on board? Ross, do you mean when you're applying for the grant? If you have a letter of support from an investor that says that, that they're keen to invest in your business, they want to see more traction from customers before they do something like that, it can only assist in validating the business and showing the commercial opportunity. Deb, I don't believe that they have to be full-time. I will double check for you, but I think just refer in when you're filling out the grant application. Just make note of the number of employees that you have. Ross, is Tier 2 the same as Tier 1 in relation to how you present the information? Is there a significantly higher level of scrutiny in relation to development of solution and commercial? Yeah. Tier 2 really expects your problem to have had, your product has had success, significant market traction. And when you think about it, the purpose of Tier 1 is, they want you to be at minimum viable product stage, yet they want you to have go through a commercialization process as a result of receiving the Tier 1 funding. So when you go to Tier 2, you will need to have a lot more proof of revenue and be able to answer more questions around sort of growth, and they are really looking for businesses that are going to be scaling. Thank you, Ron. Ron's just posted the grants and programs link that you can use to search for grants that are currently open. So thank you for that. Bill Peng, if we're implementing pre-existing products, however, the system still requires a bit of R&D customization, we'll be able to get a grant. The pre-existing products, are they, so I might need you to type in here, Bill, is your pre-existing product something that you've built yourself, or are we again talking about where you're using someone else's IP that you're licensing, and then perhaps you're just modifying or building on top of their product? Natalie has asked, is it possible that we don't have IP registered at the time of stage 2, but will apply in future? Yes, it doesn't. You don't have to apply for IP protection as part of this process at all. That's an option for you if you feel like that's a good commercial option for your company. So, there's no requirement. You just go through that process at the time that's right for you, based on the IP advice that you've had from your lawyers. For the slide deck, do we need to have voice recorded, or is just slides and some notes enough? So Natalie, are you talking about when they ask you for a video pitch, or are you talking about? My advice would be, if they ask you for a video pitch, that you do try and get your head in there, because part of the reason why people ask for video pitches is it's that they're wanting to get to know the founder a little bit more. And so even though it's great to have slides to look at and to be able to understand what you're talking about, a lot of the video pitch idea is about actually providing some insight into who is the person behind this business, how do they interact with it, do they look passionate about the idea, those sorts of things. So I would always try and get myself in there somewhere. And if the founders make the contribution to match the grant requirement, is it possible to pay them with the grant? No, you have to, you just have to match the funding. And then, but of course, you know, ideally, from using this funding, you would be able to significantly increase your customer sales. And so hopefully you'll be able to pay yourself back with revenues. But yeah, but you do actually need to, you wouldn't be able to put that in the budget that you're going to pay yourself back. Bill, yeah, someone else's IP. I again, you can try, but I would really, it's not really what the grant is designed for. So the changes and things that you would be making would have to be significant, and you'd need to, I guess, be able to demonstrate that you have you'd need to probably be able to show that you have the license and the right to be able to redistribute that product for a period of time if you're going to be investing into building out additional features onto a pre-existing product. Hey, thanks, Scott. That's awesome. There's some great grant links there to different grants, services to find grants to apply for. Deb, the suppliers we use to complete the project, they need to be based in Australia. Ideally, they should be based in Queensland. It does talk about this in the frequently asked questions as well, but ideally, you know, as the grant is all about creating jobs for Queenslanders, if you're able to, if you are able to use local contractors on the grant, then it will be seen quite favourably. Thanks, Alberto, for joining us. Good luck with your grant application if you put one in. Okay, I think that's it. So there's still, good on you, Alberto. All right, I've still got 30 people who are on the call, so I'm just going to give you one last chance if anyone's got any questions to drop them in the chat. Otherwise, we'll sign off, and I'll see you on my next webinar. Thanks, everyone. See you later. Jazz hands. Thanks, Daryl. Mikhail, yeah, I'm pretty sure I'll double check for you, Mikhail, but I'm pretty sure that you would just put yourself down, and if you're not drawing a revenue yet, that's okay. If you're not drawing a salary yet, that's okay. Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Till next time. Oh, I missed all these. Okay, I just realized that I missed a whole bunch of questions that are in this Q&A tab. So I'm just going to really quickly answer them.